This is a no-wake zone. As you can clearly see, this particular personal watercraft possesses a large wake. Boats like these can reach high speeds of up to 70 miles per hour. Now imagine the motor's propellers slicing through the water. These waters are where the gentle sea cow of Florida likes to graze seagrass beds or find a mate. Terrifying boats with deadly motors are just one of the many dangers the West Indian manatee or Floridian manatee face. I decided to make it my mission to understand these dangers and see just how manatees were being affected. I did not realize the immense endangerment humans put this species in. With mortality rates rising, just as they did last year, I knew the best way of taking action is to educate as many people in my community as possible about what these animals truly face. I packed up my camera and headed to the local park to see these amazing animals for myself. I was not expecting that my own research could be an endangerment for the manatees of Manatee Park in Southwest Florida. To gain a better understanding, I spoke with Tiare Friedrich and Cecily Houston about my research.
Right now, there's a big problem with harassment. People don't realize what the term harassment means. And harassment is essentially anything that changes a manatee's natural behavior. So if you go by a manatee in a kayak and you go over them and they stop feeding and they move away, that's harassment. Like you didn't poke it, you didn't throw anything at it, but you still change their behavior. And when a manatee goes out feeding, it takes a certain amount of energy to go to these places and to feed. And when they're disrupted, that's more energy they have to use to move to another location. And in a lot of these areas, manatees spend a lot of time resting generally throughout the day. And that's part of their daily cycle, so to speak. And when these animals are disrupted when they're trying to rest, it really does mess with their energy and what they have to do and having to move constantly, and also causes a level of stress in their body too.
So I think one of the biggest things, and not just because I'm a teacher, but I think education is a huge role in this. I think that a lot of people don't realize when you say don't harass a manatee that are along the beach, they don't understand why that's necessary. A lot of the time when manatee are close to shore or on a sandbar and people think that they're saving them, it's actually when they're mating. And so when you interrupt that, you're disrupting that mating chance, and which essentially hurts the population.
After these inquiries, I knew I needed a better understanding of the catastrophic future the manatees could possibly be facing if we continue on this path.
Right now, scientists are sounding the alarm over an unusually high number of manatee deaths in Florida, on average about 5 a day since the start of this year.
The mortality rates of manatees in Florida have doubled over the last 2 years, from 600 in 2020 to over 1,000 in 2021. This year is looking to produce similar results as 2021 unless humans make a change. Manatees are being killed by boat motors, climate change, lack of food, stress, and more. While at Manatee Park, I came across a dead manatee myself. Now, determining why it died is hard. It could have been a natural death, stress-induced, a fatal circumstance with a boat motor, or something else. A manatee's ecosystem is just as important to their survival. Manatees like rivers, canals, estuaries, and other spaces to find food, reproduce, or raise their young. They depend on Florida during the months of November through April for temperate waters. You can remember when they're visiting by thinking of them as the marine mammal version of a snowbird. Keeping the waters clean of pollution and acting towards preventing climate change can be helpful in ensuring their comfort while here. Also, their main source of food is seagrass, which is suffering from algae blooms and contaminants found in the water. Algae bloom blocks the sunlight, which is seagrass's primary energy source. Contaminants come from pollution such as chemical waste, oil spills, sewer waters, and more.
But for manatees, we have in some areas waters that are warming. So like in the Indian River Lagoon, for example, they've been having a lot of algal blooms, and algal blooms have actually been a problem all over Florida. But one thing that can make them worse is warmer temperatures. So consistently having warmer temperatures in the summer can make these blooms worse, and then the blooms can kill off seagrass, and they can cause toxicity to other animals. So it's more of what's happening to the environment as a whole because of climate change that causes a potential threat to manatees. We've also been seeing more severe winters, and what happens to manatees is if they're in water less than 68 degrees for a certain amount of time, they get cold stress, which is similar to hypothermia. And manatees need to go to these warm water sites like springs and power plants in order to stay warm. And if we're seeing these cold fronts move in for longer and longer periods of time, well, a lot of times manatees can't leave these warm water sites while it's cold because they get sick. So these are periods of time when manatees can't feed, and then they lose weight, or if they get too cold, they can get infections. So it kind of predisposes them to a lot of other issues. If it just happens to be colder for a longer period of time, or if we get more hurricanes, and even sea level rise can be a problem because you get salt water can intrude into freshwater sources, which can completely change the environment in an area. So there's a lot of things that could possibly happen to the environment because of climate change that could impact manatees.
Although manatees face such devastating odds, we can act towards better understanding our personal impact and what specific conservation efforts are best. At one point, the manatee was able to move from endangered to threatened on the endangered species list. We need to get back to that as more people need to invest in the protection and conservation of this wonderful species.
I think that more can be done on the economic side to protect manatees. So when the manatee was downlisted from endangered to threatened, one of the things that comes along with that is a reduced amount of funding towards manatee protections, and things that had been happening for a long time, like consistent studies that had been done, or even the number of staff members working on manatee protection, a lot of those things were cut. And that's one of the reasons that people are pushing for the manatee to be relisted as endangered. Technically speaking, endangered and threatened animals are supposed to receive the same protections under the Endangered Species Act, but if there's not enough money to fund those protections and what needs to be done, that ends up being a problem. There's also the Manatee Rescue and Rehabilitation Partnership, which is a group of organizations from zoos to agencies and nonprofits that all work together to rescue, rehab, and release manatees. And more funding is absolutely needed for that, especially now with the unusual manatee mortality event, which is this huge die-off of manatees in the Indian River Lagoon. There are a lot of manatees that need to be rescued, and we need more manpower and more places to put them and more resources for that.
Organizations such as Save the Manatee Club, Florida Fish and Wildlife, SeaWorld's Rescue and Rehabilitation Program, marine hospitals and aquariums, and more can utilize more funding to widespread their opportunities in order for people to save more manatees than harm them. I spoke with an educator, Megan, from SeaWorld after visiting their rescue center for manatees to learn about their current rehabilitation efforts.
So the manatees that we have here, they're all actually owned by the state of Florida. It's actually a group called the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Try saying that 3 times fast. With them, they'll actually be the ones that people will call out in the wild. We'll come out there, they'll call SeaWorld, have us go pick them up, and then the state of Florida is actually the one who has us release them back into the wild. So with our babies, about 3 years old or about 600 pounds, we'll start releasing them back out if the state of Florida deems them releasable. If not, we'll hold on to them until they come back in, and they check about every few months. The ones that are in our bigger tanks are going to be the ones that are a little worse for wear. Those are entanglements with fishing line or boating accidents and stuff like that. So we make sure that those guys are here for as long as they need to be. If they need to be here for 2 years, they're here for 2 years. If they need to be here for the rest of their life, they're here for the rest of their life. If they only need to be here for a month, they're only here for a month. If we need to fix them up out in the ocean and we can do it out there on our boats, we'll do it out there. We won't even bring them back here. As much as the economic impact with that, it is governed by the state of Florida, so it is by us, our tax dollars. We are the ones who are paying for that. So it's not necessarily anything that SeaWorld does on its own. It is owned by the state of Florida. And same thing, the sea turtles and any other of the creatures that we do rescue here, they're all owned by the state of Florida. So it would be through their money, and whatever funds that they have for that would be how we pay for it.
Small acts like changing your fishing location to ensure your hook doesn't catch a manatee calf and its mother, or being aware of where your empty water bottle goes, can make an impact. You can get involved in larger efforts too, like beach cleanups, volunteering at a marine hospital, educating the public about boating awareness, and much more. One act makes a difference, so act now.